Okay, everyone, we're starting. I feel like there's still people out there. Keona's going to do it. Hey, they're late to arrive. They still haven't gotten their badge, whatnot. You know, all this is being recorded. These are the hot mic moments. This is when something you say something you shouldn't say, which I do a lot. This is when you hire a PR person the next day. What were you going to say? You didn't want to say it? Yeah.
About the PR person on TikTok.
Front row is perfectly wide open. Thank you. Thank you. There was a large crowd out there, right? They were out there just chatting, all things going on. It was the all right, we are back. We're back for a Thursday Think and Link here at the Grainbelt Brewery Building, which is, of course, an amazing castle to beer. Well, now it's a castle to architecture, really, if you look at it. RSP Architects, they did this space. They are a national firm. They are a sponsor, one of the sponsors of this event. And they're spectacular. And if you ever want to meet any of them, they're usually around here somewhere, some form. There's one right back there. There's one right back there. So RSP Architects, most notable for me at least, was they designed the first Target store, like Target store #1, which is kind of cool, right? In the history of Minnesota. Yeah, Roosevelt, and she came from Target.
If anyone would like to visit T1, it's in Roseville, Minnesota. Yeah. Does not look anything like the original anymore.
No. Okay, and then the other sponsor is Lake One, and I think one of our Lake One people is here. Thank you very much, sir, because pitching in for Ryan Rudd. Yeah, I still give him a hard time because he's not here. He's our most introverted sponsor by far. So what I like to say is that anybody of you can just link in with Ryan Rudd and say, why weren't you there? That's all you need to do. Because like I said this last time, and like 10 people did that, and it was very funny. He does have something else going on, and it seemed like a pretty good excuse that he was not here. So anyway, Lake One, and they do HubSpot implementation stuff. And then Capsule, which is a special projects agency here in Minneapolis, and we do a lot of work for brands like Quick Trip, Patagonia, let's see, Hydro Flask, Sitka. Keona's looking at me going, come on, keep listening. What are you doing? Stop talking. We do a whole bunch of cannabis work, which I don't know how you feel about cannabis, but we've actually had our cannabis friend on stage before, Cureleaf. Anyway, it's a fascinating field if you ever want to talk cannabis. I am not a consumer, just to get that out there, so we're clear on that, but I appreciate it, right? Mental health, it's good. Yeah. Okay. So I am going to, and then we have Jess Carlson as my co-host, and then we have our two wonderful speakers. I'm going to have them introduce themselves, right? Anything else? Any other preamble I need? Is that it? We cover it?
I think that should do it.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks
Kevin,
for having me again.
Yeah. Kevin, you want to take it away with your intro? A little background. Yeah, just a little background on you. Where you went to school, where you went to grade school, where you went.
Is that good? First, the dinosaurs came.
Yes.
I'm not going to go back that far. So Kevin Ryan, background, at least, pertinent to what we're talking about. I actually started in food science. So my background is R&D. So did food science and then started in the food industry, actually at General Mills in R&D. Wasn't that good at R&D. And went into innovation pretty quickly. So part of the I Squad, and there's a lot of people here that know what that is. Yes, represent. And then was there for 15 years, 16 years, doing innovation and strategy, and then left General Mills, went to Amazon, and I'm a one-trick pony, did basically the same thing, innovation strategy at Amazon for prime, non-prime, Alexa type stuff, and then left Amazon and started Malachite, which basically does front-end innovation and strategy. See, I told you, for CPG, retail, and food service companies. So that's me.
And there's a reason why you keep doing it, because if you guys haven't worked with Kevin Ryan, he is amazing. And I've worked with him at General Mills, but even recently in my most recent gig, and like best of the best of the best.
Thank you.
It's my little, you can pay me later for it.
You haven't worked with Jennifer. She
You
is
don't.
amazing to work with. There's a reason why it's great to work with, like people who really are good at what they do. So. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was not required, but I'm Jennifer Jorgenson. I'm the CEO of Back to Nature Foods. It's about a $50 million natural foods brand, mainly cookies and crackers. Prior to that, I spent about 27 years at General Mills. I know, it's like when I got up there and I had to like start count, I was like, oh my God, it's too long. But most of my career has been in marketing, brand management, and I've worked on some amazing brands. All the kids cereals at General Mills, super fun. I led the Haagen-Dazs global business and probably gained 10 pounds during that. Like every night you had to try a different flavor. I've lived internationally for General Mills as well. But right now I'm really enjoying the entrepreneurial piece of it's a small-ish brand that we're really trying to treat like a startup, and it's been really, really fun.
I love that. I'm going to give you both a wonderful compliment, hopefully, and half the room as well. General Mills produces some amazing people. It just you run into people coming out of General Mills. It's kind of what we on the outside refer to as an up and out culture. You're either up or you're out. But when you come out, they're really gifted, talented, smart, really impressive. They're just a good human if they spend some time there. So it's really cool to have you both on the stage. I'm going to pass it over to Jess, who's going to ask you the first question.
I have a personal question for you. Yes. What was the weirdest ice cream flavor you ever had to test?
Oh my God. Well, I was on the board of this JV that we had, Haagen-Dazs Japan, and Japan's a small-ish, country physically, but it was a really big business for us. But they went crazy on innovation, like so much innovation, but they would launch flavors with like beans in the ice cream, or sweet potatoes or carrots, or, some of that was weird, but it always tasted really good. They had one with gold flakes, and they were really innovative. I learned a lot from them. And it always it sounds weird, and then it always tastes great. Yeah,
I love that. Well, it's a good intro to sort of part of the conversation we had, when we were prepping last week. And I'm really curious to hear you guys talk a little bit more about innovation and, thinking about how you integrate. We talked a little bit about how you integrate strategy with innovation, and really thinking about that within your categories.
That's a really big question.
The big one.
I mean, I always take a step back when I talk to any client or anyone about strategy and innovation. The first thing I always ask people is, what do you mean by innovation? Because people define it differently. So like you'll walk in and people are like, we need more innovation in this company. And I'm always like, what do you mean by innovation? And then when you ask them, they always pause and they're like, that's a good question. I'm like, how did you get this far without, and then they'll say, and I, point at someone, and we're talking like, senior level, and they'll be like, I think it's new flavors. I'm like, okay. And then the other person's like, I think it's a new business model. I'm like, okay, see, this is the issue. It's defining innovation first, and then understanding once you define it, how does that definition, how do you measure it? What are the metrics, KPIs, all that kind of stuff. Getting that is like the first step for me. That's the first step. But anyway, I'll pass it over at that point.
Well, no, I could not agree more with that. And it's funny that innovation usually always means new product innovation, and it shouldn't. That's the hardest, most risky, most expensive thing you can do. And if you do it wrong, you can actually hurt your core business. But people just keep hitting that one thing and forget that there's a lot of other innovation that is often smarter than that. But I agree with Kevin. It's generally the people want to jump to the ideas, and people often have ideas, that they've made up in their own minds that they can't wait to get out. And I've done that too. But the strategy is the most important part. Like sitting down to define, like, do we all mean the same thing? And then based on what you think the innovation can do, resource it appropriately. Because I've got some people from my team here today that they've heard me talk about innovation, like line extensions. We should be cheap and cheerful, just like crank those things out. And they should be good, not bad products, but like that's a low resource product. And they remind me all the time that it's not cheap nor cheerful, but it should, but the idea is I don't need to get involved in testing it. We don't need a rigorous insights program. We don't need to spend millions of dollars on the launch. We're doing this one because it's a quick hit line extension, and we'll spend the money when it's a big idea.
And just on those same lines, and we talked about this also, sort of there are many ways to innovate. So it doesn't have to always be a new product or a new business model. Oh, sorry, or a new process or a new business model. So what are some other ways that companies can think about innovating to help performance or help brand recognition along those lines?
I mean, to Jennifer's point, I mean, innovation can be lots of those things. A good example is like Hershey does a lot with price pack architecture, which is amazing. I mean, they've made a lot of money. I don't know how much money, but I think they made a lot of money by just like, we're going to take a peanut butter cup and instead of two, we're going to put it in one and we're going to put it in a particular place. And this is going to be for this season or this season. That's innovation. I mean, it is where you're going to put it, where you're going to do it. That is a way to do it. And you've not changed the product. You just changed the packaging, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not, I think to Jennifer's point, it isn't as sexy as like, ooh, new, or as I have people tell me all the time, which I think I've written about this before, they think they're going to get a Swiffer moment. Like just this epiphany. And I'm like, would you stop with the epiphany? There is no epiphany. There really isn't. It's just hard work, hard work, hard work. And then it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Like, is that last piece that you put in the jigsaw puzzle any different than the other pieces? No, it's just that you did a lot of hard work and then boom, you put the piece in and that was it. That's innovation. It's not sexy, but it is what it is. You do the hard work and you come out the other end. And it could be PPA or it could be a Swiffer.
But you're right. That doesn't win the awards and so people are more incented to like, oh, there's a new flavor that has like truffle oil in it. And it's like, nope, that's not going to be big. But it's the PPA stuff that can be really big. The other thing that I think is really fun is brand innovation. Like if you guys all know Poppy and that's such a cool brand. That's not new. It just looks good now. It was so dated and dusty and old and struggled, and all of a sudden they rebranded and it's on fire and it's amazing. That's innovation. They didn't change the product. It's a lot less expensive than spending all that R&D work. But the other thing that you can do, just news on the core, just keeping your core fresh with whatever it is that your consumers value. And everyone knows what it is. Is it they like the chocolate? More protein, less of this. Like these are little innovations that strengthen your core that don't cause you all of the churn of launching a new product that might fail.
Yeah, I'm an off the cuff question. I'm curious about like it's almost like we want to be heroes in the innovation space, and all we perceive as the other stuff, like a Swiffer example. Nobody in this room was involved in Swiffer, right? So nobody knows how much shit they had to go through to get to that.
It was a great launch. I'm not saying anything bad about it. It was great.
Right. But, that level of innovation, and we see that as this pinnacle of thing, and there are plenty of other examples out there that we look at. But really, that's not the reality. You're not seeing that reality if you're inside the organization. But you also present it back to everyone like, yeah, that's what it was like. We were brilliant, right? Because you have to.
Yes.
Right? Which is also almost a detriment to the rest of us.
It's mythologizing it, which everyone does. But yeah, innovation in that sense is, I don't know, I think of innovation as more of a thought process and a culture than I do about the thing itself. It is the best innovation in any company it comes from a culture of innovation, not a process, like a simple process. Everyone's got to believe in it, and there's like a power. There's a reason that small, really powerful startups almost look like a cult. When you go in there, you're like, okay. But what it means is everybody in the company is all charging in the right direction, and they know exactly what they're doing because they've spent a long time on problem definition. Whereas in big companies, sometimes what gets lost is, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing X because someone told me to do X, but I don't know the bigger story. And that gets lost in a big company sometimes. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and just to build on that, like I've done a ton of turnarounds. I love a good turnaround. If anyone has a turnaround, call me.
Really?
I love it so much.
Cool.
But mainly because it's sexy.
It's sexy and dirty at the same time.
Yeah, I like that. Now you made me lose my train.
Sorry.
But in a turnaround, usually it's because you've lost the way of the cult,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
you've forgotten what you're about and what made it special and different and unique. And you have to go back to like what it was that started the brand or made the brand jump. We did this woman that worked for me that was amazing, did this deep dive on Lucky Charms. Lucky Charms was not failing, but it was stagnant. And she watched every commercial back, like decades and decades and decades. Like some of them were on like microfiche or something. I don't know, but
It's so cool.
But she found the aha, and I was like, oh my God, that's the aha. And now we knew what to do. But when you lose that cult perspective of like, we're all about the same thing and we understand our business and our consumer so thoroughly, the brand can lose its way.
Well, you just answered one of our other questions about just thinking about brand purpose. So I just want to dive just maybe one step deeper into that and thinking about, obviously to that point, Lucky Charms brands evolve over many years. So it's important to keep the essence of that. And how do you do that? And why is that important to really the innovation and the growth and the long-term, the longevity of a company?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's that developing that distinctiveness as a brand, like you stand for something, doesn't have to be differentiated. I know that's like blasphemy to a lot of people, but distinct. Sorry. Sorry. And sticking with that over time is what keeps your brand like strong. I mean, we look at Oatly a lot on our business as kind of a mentor, not in our category, but how have they done that? And taking something, another example that was old and dusty, stuck around for decades before they unlocked it. But they've stayed true to that brand and that personality, and they're very distinct with what they're doing. That has helped.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of standing for something is big. I mean, someone just told me about how big energy drinks are right now. I saw some number about energy drink, and I'm like, it's just pop, it's just soda, it's just in a different, but it stands for something. It stands for energy. Whereas a lot of the soda companies and stuff, I know there's like a lot of baggage on sugar, but energy drinks have a lot of sugar too. But I think a lot of those brands, they have a very distinct sense of self about what they are. So I don't know. I agree, though. I think it has a lot to do with how you position yourself, but how you think about yourself too.
Yeah, I was going to go down the road of, and I agree. You don't have to be distinctive in the world. You have to, or distinct, I should say. That totally makes sense. This purpose-driven movement that's happened over the past decade for brands, good or bad, seems horrific in my point of view. But that's my opinion. Also, the opinion of Mark Ritson, a professor that I often bring up. Just horrific. Yeah, horrific for brands. Yeah, yeah. And I just trying to attach on to the most current. Right, the trend. What is? Everybody's doing this, so we got to have a purpose, right? And not going back to the origin.
So I don't know that I'd say it's horrific.
We're not on the board with the horrific.
Go ahead. Too far. Okay, maybe too far.
Maybe a little too far. But I think it's dangerous for a lot of brands because I think it's an add-on, like you said. And when it's an add-on that doesn't add to your brand and who you are, well, that's just kind of dumb. And then you're operating like a charity, which is nice. That's very nice, but you're not adding shareholder value. if you can have a purpose that adds back to your brand, that's really brilliant. And I just because my friend Mark Addix is in the room, he'll remember this, but this is a very old, not that you're old, but an old example. I just stepped in that. When Haagen-Dazs had the Save Lids to Save Lives campaign, like about breast cancer, but the yogurt had calcium and vitamin D and all these things that were healthy, and it kind of all worked together for women and aging and all of that. That was brilliant, and it was distinctive and helped to build that brand. But if like I did that on my business, well, that would just be silly. So thinking about a purpose that's additive to who you are and that does good in the world, but does good for your brand, I think that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, I always think of it as the golden thread. There needs to be a thread that runs through it, and you should never be able to put it in front of someone and someone go, what? Like, to your point, what isn't making sense? Why would you do that? And then it just becomes like a me too. Like, oh, we have to jump on this.
And so the thread was always there. You just found that thread, right?
Well, it
In
fits.
theory, right? It fits. The thread
It fits with who you are, yeah.
Is we've had Christine Marvin and Marvin Windows on, and she talked about finding their mission as a window company and bringing light into people's lives and the healthy nature of light in your life. And they just figured this out like a year before. And how many years old are you as a brand? It took you that long at first. Then I'm like, why am I being judgy? I think that's a really brilliant thing that they actually got to it. And figured it out. And it's really elegant. And I didn't even say it as well as she did it. She did it really well. But if it's there already, it makes sense. If it's not, which is most of it, that's why the horrific statement, just to clarify, a vast majority is not. It's an add-on.
Just checking boxes.
Yeah.
It's not worth your time. Unless you want to do charity, and that's very nice.
Different business, different, yeah, .org. Yeah, not .com. Yeah.
Disruption. So the economic environment is horrific, maybe. And
that's not the new trend word. We can't have that in here.
Okay, sorry. We will not use that word. But in the short and long term, what do you guys think, is the outlook for disruptors in the food industry as a whole, whether it be in natural foods or in other spaces?
There's always disruptors. There always is. I mean, read Clayton Christensen. There's always somebody who's going to realize that someone has too much margin and they're going to take it. They're going to see that opportunity and take it, or that they, have overshot their benefits and that someone can come in and say, you know what, people really don't need 9 more blades. They just need 7 or 2. So there's always someone like that. Every industry has that. But I mean, to your point about I think we have seen inflated disruption prior to COVID. I mean, in the sense of, I wouldn't even say disruption. We saw a lot of small players because money was freer. And so we just saw a lot more, but no, it's not going away at all. It's definitely coming. I think the environment has changed, but I think it's still there. So,
yeah. And I'd say necessity is the mother of invention. So the disruption something else will be disrupted, but there will always be disruptors. I think the difference is the disruption has been coming from startups, and a lot of those startups aren't going to be able to make payroll or pay for their inventory, so they may not all survive. So there's an opportunity for bigger CPG to do more disruption, which has been harder.
Retailers.
Well, they're doing a better job. Bigger CPG is not doing a great job, and it's hard. I can tell you, I've been there. It's hard to dedicate the mind space to something like that because the jobs are so big and the scale is so broad, you just can't. But I'll tell you, I have a story even from my back. I think it was my second job in marketing where I worked on Pillsbury cookies, and I started this job like a month after Nestle entered the cookie business with that. Remember the break and bake bars? And it was a disaster because that was a really big profitable business. And somebody from R&D came over to my desk with this hand copied piece of paper that was the concept of Pillsbury to do that exact same thing from 1970. And so this was 2000. So that was 30 years. We knew it was a better idea and we didn't do it because our plant was engineered to run the things that we called the chubs. So we had the chubs. And so we did not disrupt ourselves, even though we knew it was a better idea. And we opened the door, to your point. Someone's going to see there's a better way. And we let someone in that category and they've never left. So there, I think that's the big CPG opportunity is, hey, could we disrupt ourselves and find a way to do it where you don't lose margin or, but someone will do it if you don't.
Yeah, and that's just it, is that it's difficult to have someone in a company basically produce something that's going to put them out of business or at least put themselves out of a job. But it also speaks to the idea it's never an idea problem, ever. All the ideas that are out there are in the files at all these companies. Oh yeah, they're all there. I shouldn't say never, but I rarely see an idea. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I never see an idea where I'm like, ooh, I've never seen that. I see people in the audience who've been in the industry as long. I never see that. You never see it. So it's not that. It's like focusing on it and saying, that's it. Here's why we're doing it. And here's the right target, all that kind of stuff. That's what you need. But yeah, it's never the ideas. It's what you do with them.
Which gets back to, if you're in the investor world, you're looking at the team, not necessarily the product or the idea, right? So what the team can accomplish. Because I've seen teams like Compellent used to be in town and basically storage area networks. And they did the same thing 3 times in a row, same business essentially, and launched it and sold it and launched it and sold it 3 very successful times. It's a nice lifestyle when you can do that instead of trying to recreate something or create something totally new to the world that probably can't be done.
There's a lot to be said for persistence. Like when you look at people that really are good at starting businesses and doing stuff, I give 50% of it is just how bullheaded they are about just doing it, going and doing. Other people give up, but they just keep going. There's actually a lot to that, I think. I mean, there's an idea and focus. I mean, that's a big, huge deal. But there's something about just the drive too. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you.
Well, I think it's sort of along those lines. And as you both were talking about this, I was, it's that confluence of innovation in a big CPG and culture. And so how does a company sort of approach that and build that more innovative culture, or at least how do they plant the seeds for openness to, objective openness to innovation, so that poor man didn't have to, shakily, I mean, in my mind, he's like, we have this idea. How do we avoid something like that and really sort of continue to spur those ideas?
Yeah. I know.
I was gonna say, I can start, but we can kind of go together. I mean, I would say there's so much, but it's very difficult for a big company to be that because it's, I've heard people call it ambidextrous. It's just the idea that the way I think about it is I think about there's printing companies, right? So if you print books and then there's authors, right? They both produce a book, but it's like the process of getting there is different. And if I was building a company that printed books, I would need people that knew how to typeset. I'm very old fashioned. Typeset, all that kind of stuff. But if I was writing books, that's a totally different group of people. And when you're a big company, you are really good at printing. I mean, we're in the land of, Cheerios. Cheerios prints Cheerios really good. And there's no variation. That's how they make a lot of money. No matter what company you are, you don't make any variation differences. You always are printing. And you got all the right people in-house to print. And then all of a sudden you're like, we're gonna start writing books. Well, you just hired a bunch of people that are really good printers. So it's like having both of them together. They're very different kind of people. So it's hard to live together. It's hard to measure progress different about how often do we write a book? When we can print 1 million books in an hour, how many books could we write in an hour? Like, it's very different. So that's part of it.
To build on that, I do think structure is a big reason. I think it's a big reason why big CPG finds it harder to be truly disruptive, because the structure doesn't allow for the eyeballs and the resources on it. Like, they have more billions and billions of dollars of resource, but in terms of talent to launch an idea, they don't have it because they're running a very large business with a set number of people, where in an entrepreneurial environment, the entire team is focused on one thing and one thing only. And so I'm seeing that difference now going from my last business at General Mills was about $1.5 billion. Now I'm at a $50 million business. And I have roughly the same size marketing team. I don't have an I used to also have an innovation team. I don't have an innovation team, but the same size marketing team for 50 million and 1.5 billion. So like I had one person ran a collection of brands that totaled $50 million. That person just couldn't do what my team of, 5 people can do on the smaller business. And so I think it's just your goals are different, structure, focus, priorities, it's all different. And I think that's why it sometimes it's hard for a big CPG to be successful.
Yeah.
Risk too. I think risk is very different. And the way in which they think about risk is very, very different. And the sense, what I mean is that how you approach it. I mean, I've heard people say, well, how can we be a little bit less risky and still do innovation? And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. What did you even say? Innovation is about risk, no matter what you're doing, because it's always going to be pressures in the rest of the I'm thinking of big company now, that are pushing back against it. And so you need someone who, again, who's a leader that is persistent, convicted about it, has conviction about it, is okay with the risk. And actually the right people that actually are in a team that actually can be open with their ideas, and they have a leader that actually can push it through the organization. Because I'll tell you what, organizations do not usually like new things. They really don't. You've got to have someone who's going to push and run interference. I mean, the best team I've ever been on and the best teams that I've ever seen usually have someone at the top that is senior enough that they don't really want any more kudos. Because the worst teams I've ever seen are the ones where the leader of the team is like managing their own brand. And then they're like sorting ideas to see which one's going to get them promoted. It's a weird mix. So that's what I mean. I go back to the culture thing. It's all about culture. That is the culture. So you need to organize it in the right way. Sorry.
Steve Fahrenholtz. Yeah, as someone that's really good at that. Didn't need the accolades anymore. Really, I don't know if he ever cared about him. Now that I think about it, really. I got to go back to printing Cheerios because that's going to be in my head for a long time now. I suppose it is more of a printing
It's awesome
process.
to watch them make Cheerios. It's amazing.
I would love to see that. There's probably videos of it out there. Do they allow them to have video of it? Is that is this too much inside the curtain? Anyway, you had a wonderful metaphor for big versus small, and in this whole conversation, and because I've always, you run into people like, well, big companies are bad. They're always doing bad things, right? It's all about the small, the startup, the doing, trying to make it happen. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. These are good people. I've met big people in big companies, and they're not evil. They're trying to do good things. Right. Talk about that a little bit more, because you've both been big and you've both been in smallish.
You're best at this. You've been at both like that.
Well, yeah. I'd say first of all, we are all good people, but I think everyone in the room probably knows that. Yeah, I mean, working in big food can be hard, and it gets a bad rap. And I think people think there are really easy solutions, or, when I read articles that are like, well, they're putting the chemicals on the food. And it's like, do you think we're like shaking extra chemicals on?
They really do think.
No, I do. I think they do. It's in everyone's best interest to do the right thing. Like, nobody wants to risk the reputation by like having the chemical sprinkler. And I'd say the big companies have the most to lose. And so if you want a very safe product, I would stick with the brand, because some of the, I've done a lot of M&A and working with smaller startups, and they don't always have the quality and the safety programs that a bigger company has, because they don't have the resources yet. But and they'll get there over time. But it's the first thing you do if you're going to acquire a business. You're looking at, okay, what are the claims they're making and what's their process? Like, I want to make sure it's up to snuff. And so it's complicated. And but I would say I feel really, at least at where I've worked before, I felt very good that they were always trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that people who say that small is good or big is bad, that's just wrong. There is resources. I mean, I know people that are in small companies that would kill for the resources in a big company. And big companies can do things that small can't. So it's like, yeah, there's a lot of FOMO on both sides, I think. Yeah.
They don't really mix well, though. That's what also interesting, because sometimes there's like small groups within the big companies, right? And if a small company gets too many resources, you see them kill themselves with those resources, right? They just burn through it. It's interesting how those two, the difference between and how they have to almost stay separate in some ways.
There's a lot of crossover between, even at a small company you think is small, there's a lot of ex-big people at the small company. I think the magic is like listening and learning, because you'll see how a small company does things, and some things are crazy. Some things, like we bought a company who did their branding via numerology. Numerology. That's how they decided if it was a good brand name. And I was like, yeah, that was my first reaction. And then I was like, well, wait a second. Your hit rate is the same as my hit rate. And so like, maybe I'm the one that's wrong. But that's a dumb example, but you've got to listen and learn, and you're going to pick up things that you're like, wow, we should be doing it the way they're doing it. And they are obviously trying to learn from big on things as well, but there are things to learn on both sides for sure. Numerology is the answer.
Okay, team, that's what we're doing. Naming numerology is our next process for that. Wow, that's a bit strange. Okay, yes, question?
Okay. I think maybe before we turn it over to you all, I just really wanted to ask about sustainability, because certainly it's a topic that is on many people's minds, and particularly in the food industry. And as we were just talking about big versus small, that comes up a lot. So as you guys think about sustainability practices and what you're either consulting for businesses or what you all are implementing in your businesses, what do you think is, the most critical to consider, whether it's processes, packaging, any number of things? Obviously, it can run the gamut. So I would just love that thoughts there.
From a consumer or from a corporate perspective?
I think from a business perspective, obviously consumers have their own opinions about what's important.
I mean, for me, it would just be when I've talked to corporations and worked on projects for sustainability, it's really about the ecosystem of sustainable processes. Mm-hmm. It's not cohesive at all, and it's not there yet. I mean, just think about like the recycling process. Like, municipalities are not like a different municipalities. Everyone's different. Everything's different. All the processes are very much, and part of that has to do with regulation. Part of that has to do with, all that kind of stuff. So we're early days still, which is sad, but we are early days on what can be done but I think companies just need to keep pushing, because I think that there's a flywheel potential in sustainable processes. And it's like, are you going to wait for government? Are you going to wait for this to happen? You're going to wait for this to get to a circular kind of economy. But
I mean, I could not agree more. It's way more complicated than I think most people understand. And the choices, sometimes it's like, well, yeah, you should be more sustainable, but the solutions aren't usually available at an industrial scale. And so if I wanted to buy packaging that was more sustainable, it doesn't exist, or it doesn't have moisture barrier or shelf life, or it doesn't protect the product through transportation. And there's it's not that, the companies are evil, there's real reasons why. And I think about, we talked earlier about the economy and, maybe some of the innovation shifting. This would be a really interesting area for technology within sustainability, and for some company to partner and break the cycle, because there are so many layers within the cycle that don't work together, and that, like, from an industrial perspective, it doesn't work. And someone's got to get them all talking and find a way to break it through, but it's hard for any one brand to do it. So I'd say, from, like, you asked about what's the most important we think we can do, I would say we can make the best choices we can make on every incremental thing that we do. But for big change to happen, it's got to be someone working across a bunch of different industries.
Yeah, there's a wonderful phrase in our industry called human-centered design, that you think and you get into it and you're like, oh, yeah, that's great. But wait a minute. Where was design centered before this word existed, right? This phrase. Well, it's exists, centered on a lot of different things, right? Sometimes it's very much centered on distribution and what's efficient. And I would say cereal boxes are definitely designed for efficiency and distribution, not necessarily designed for me, but they're probably not going to change at all. But it is a curious thing. How do you redesign these massive systems to focus more on what's important for humanity and people? And it's big change that has to happen. It's not easy to make those things happen, but the push is important. Moving along the spectrum, which there's a lot of stuff happening right now that troubles me. There's a lot of litigation against big companies that are doing things around sustainability because of greenwashing. And that is just going to slow innovation.
Well, it's like, I think it's the last time I saw a survey done on it, it was like 49% of people say that they want sustainable products and 50% of people say they will not pay for it, which is really difficult. That's just difficult. I mean, I get it, but it's hard. It's a hard balance for for companies to play. It's like getting all the benefits that you necessarily need in a product with the taste, with all that kind of stuff, and then the cost on top of it. It's like, it's a hard thing from an innovation perspective for a company to get to, but it will be the challenge coming up.
Yeah, that's good. Good to hear. Okay, questions from our audience. First, third row. You want to just yell it out?
What was the aha moment?
Yeah, I will have to kill you. I can't. I actually can't share that. I'm not going to share that. I'm going out of town with her tomorrow, so I'll tell you on the plane.
Nice. I do know one Lucky Charms story that must be outside of its that got to me. So hey, it's got to be outside of the confidentiality, so I can't get in too much trouble, right? Someone who's a former General Mills, there wasn't a charm in Lucky Charms. Did you ever hear this? Long time ago. Well, this is not
Like
too
a
long.
premium?
There wasn't a charm. None of the things were charms. The shapes. There were marshmallows, but not a charm shape. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Balls.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he said, we need to have a charm in Lucky Charms. And I'm like, that seems
Sexy innovation.
He would laugh at that. Yeah. Anyway, next.
I don't need a microphone, but my question is, so when you were talking about innovation, and it could be a lot of different things. When you think about what gets tracked, you perform against it. So I think as a default, you put in your products because that's pretty easy to track sales from your products. Like, do you have any thoughts on how you measure other types of innovation?
That's actually brilliant. And I think I'm going to talk to my team about that tomorrow. Take a note. Yeah, I mean, I think but what you said is correct. What gets tracked is what gets done. And so I think it's brilliant. And, or you open your mind to say, okay, if we need this % innovation, I only want a piece of it to come from new products. And I had to do that with my team in cereal because it was this cheap and cheerful it's easier and it's fun. And, but we said a certain percentage of our innovation has to come from category expanding innovation. So it has to bring in new consumers, and then we can do the rest is, fair game, but it has to, and it got done because we tracked it.
Yeah, like as I was talking about before, when I was asking people, like, what does innovation mean for you? That is the first step where you say, what is it? Is it conventional innovation, which would be same business model, same technology that you have? That's conventional, that's line extensions, it's flavor extensions, all that kind of stuff. What percentage do you want to put in there? And by that, I mean resources. And then by that, I mean money. Like how much, and I'm talking like I've run sessions where I've literally put them to the wall and it's like, what percentage and how much is that? And, people go, oh, we're going to put money down. Okay, yes, you have to put money down. And then it's like, what percentage do you want to put into more transformational type of innovation? And what does that mean? And what's the thing? So exactly to that point, that's how you measure the KPI. That's what you put the KPIs on. And that is a really fun, good session to have. It's a very difficult session to have because people are not used to really solidifying it, but you have to do it. Otherwise you won't get anything. There's a lot of hand waving.
Another question. Yes, Corey.
So, at 3 3M, they had a term, getting Swiffer.
Yeah.
3M developed microfiber cleaning cloths because they wanted to make a way to clean without using chemicals. And then that translated it into electrostatic cleaning cloths with technology that came from filtering home air filters and such. So they developed a whole business around that chemical cleaning, leveraged Scotch-Brite brand and created these cleaning mops and wipes and towels and such. And they were getting into Target and other big box retailers developing a nice business. And overnight, Swiffer just came in and just moved them on. So what would be your advice? Large companies have to deal with this as well. If you capture something disruptive or lightning in a bottle, how can you try to maintain that hold on it and try to prevent someone else from coming in and stealing that business from under you?
I would actually say it wasn't, I don't know in your case, in this case, it's not stolen from you, you gave it away. And I'm not saying this, I don't know that whole situation. I'll give you an example. Walmart and Kmart. Everyone remember Kmart? Kmart was the company. Kmart was built on the back of Kresge. So if everyone, I'm really old now. Kresge's was a department store type thing, and they had an interesting traditional way to get products into their stores, right? They were the dominant discounter in the United States. Walmart came along and they invented DCs. They invented a new structure in order to get their stuff very cheaply to their stores. And the reason I say that is that Walmart took over everything that Kmart had built. But the reason that Kmart couldn't push back is because they had built it on top of Kresge's distribution. And so they didn't want to invent a new structure to get stuff to stores. They did not want to basically disrupt themselves. Yeah. And that you see over and over and over again. They didn't want to do anything. So they were like, no, we don't want to do that. We're going to try to make it work with our current distribution, and they could never make it work with the way Walmart was doing it. So I think in most times when I see it, it's we saw it coming, we dismissed it, or we saw it coming and dismissed it, and we decided we don't want to put the capital in. That's usually what I see. So
it's so funny because you said it in a different way, but you said it in a much better way, actually. And I didn't know anything about the history of Kmart. I didn't want to either. But I was going to say it's about confidence and leadership. And it sounds like a failure of that. And they're probably two different things that I put together on this one, but you need a leader that is willing to go big. If you've got a big idea, you've got to have the confidence that that the idea is good. And so you got to really rely on your team and go big, because the power of being there first in a big way, not technically first, but first in consumers' eyes, which as a consumer, I remember Swiffer, I don't remember the other one. It's so powerful. And then they own it. And then now you don't. And so I think it does take some leadership with some guts to
that's it.
Yeah, with some guts. You got to have a little bit of a vision, be a visionary, and know where it could go, because there's a million reasons why you shouldn't invest and it could fail and blah blah blah, but you need some guts.
Yeah, and when I say all that, like, oh, they gave it away and stuff like that, I'm not saying that as the person who was in the room at Kmart or wherever that was doing it, they would basically have said, I'm putting my job on the line and I'm going into a room and I'm banging on the table and saying, you need to do this. It's like, where do you get that kind of intestinal fortitude to do that? That's a lot. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about conviction and focus. That's really hard. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a history of a lot of companies. Blockbuster is, was that moment of they had the idea before, but decided to not, right? It's just a lot of, that happens. Kodak. I mean, we got a lot of,
and it's leadership. It comes down to psychological safety within the team. And
BlackBerry.
Yeah, right.
What is BlackBerry?
Yeah.
They don't have a BlackBerry? No.
No. Yeah.
Yes. Next.
Hi. Let me preface by saying I worked in a corporation. What I'm about to say might sound Kevin mentioned about sustainability. and a survey that consumers love it, but don't necessarily want to pay for it. I can imagine it might be because too often as consumers, we hear about a corporation that is failing and then the leadership gets exited with
Oh, yeah, right.
and like $32 million for failing. So they're thinking that. So 10 years ago, I remember reading an article about Coors beer, Colorado, and someone had brought the CEO's attention to the fact that they were privatizing profits but socializing the waste and the outcome. And his mind was like open. He was like, what? So Coors instituted this very simple way for anybody, anywhere, less drinking Coors beer, that you could send your empty can back to Coors and they would handle recycling as big part of the compass and all of that. I thought that sounded so smart. Do you have any other example, Jennifer or Kevin, of companies that are engaged in sustainability in a way that they're just taking a little more ownership of like that whole life cycle of their product and consumption?
I have an answer, but you might not like it. But I call that fake recycling because it puts the onus on the consumer to then, now I have to go like get a special pouch to mail my beer can, and then I gotta find the postage and where do I mail it? And like, if I drank a lot of beer, then how many times am I going to the post office? And like, it sounds nice. And I've seen a lot of other brands do this too. It sounds really nice. But what they're trying to do is pass the buck to the consumer and use it as a marketing idea. And that never sits right with me. Like, I feel like if we're going to solve it, we have to solve it in a way that, first of all, you don't make the consumer do that, because we don't want them running the post office 25 times a week, drinking a case of beer. Like, that's just not realistic.
There's a lot of gas being spent
and
on
it's
each
like-
of the post office. What?
Yeah, you could do the math. I think the problem has to truly solve it with an industrial solution, not a consumer solution. It's not fair to the consumers. They're not going to do it. And I almost feel like we're tricking them. If we say we're recyclable, I've seen other brands do it too. I don't like it.
No, I agree. I think it's true. I think a lot of the sustainability efforts that are going to come through are going to be at the corporate level, and all the waste that is produced by companies and things like that. I mean, that's a bigger drop in the bucket at the end of the day. And there's companies doing that. I mean, Patagonia and all that kind of stuff, really being very serious about that type of stuff. So I think that's good examples. And I think there's more probably companies trying to be like that. I'd love to see more companies being like that. It's difficult though.
That's a really good point. I mean, putting it on the consumer it's just not fair. There's no, it's passing the buck. Yeah. It looks like it's doing something, and it's really just virtue signaling by a corporation. Corporation saying, look how good we are. You're really not. Yeah. Next question. Yes.
So I worked at the agency that did the Swiffer launch.
I'm going to continue to get
We
this.
want to know.
This is interesting.
And the brief was, not to just like make this whole super brief was, be disruptive, get into pop culture, and get after young people in general who hate cleaning. Make it easy for them. Okay. The most famous example of that was when he gave it to Jessica Simpson, who at the time was married to Nick Lachey, and they had a show called Newlyweds, which every 20-something watched, right? And then from there, we put her on, she got on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine in her skivvies with the Swiffer, right? So those types of, but the brief was, like you just reference, be disruptive, be involved.
That is, to me, that's a great example of what I always like to tell when I'm talking to leaders. I'm like, you need to be, and I'm stealing this, needs tight, execution light. In the way in which you verbalize the consumer attention. You should not be saying stuff like, we need exactly this, this, and this. No. You tell them the needs, the tension that the consumers have, and then you let them develop within that space. To me, that's the right way to do it.
I suspect 3M wasn't mentioned in that brief. It wasn't beat 3M. Take this away from 3M. No. Right.
Could have been though. Be disruptive. I mean,
that would just be mean. Great question. Next. Oh, one more question. Yes.
I guess I would ask, we're talking about leadership and getting people in your team to make disruptive choices. What are
Let me repeat that one so everyone can hear that. What are some of your favorite lines to get people to think differently inside an organization? Damn, left field.
It depends on what the purpose is. My
Yeah.
original thought, I'm trying to think of like different purposes of why you would want people to think differently. So that's really.
So I need to develop some lines because I can't think of any, and I'm looking at my team members thinking, have I ever said anything inspiring to you? Probably not. But I'll say I've gotten a lot of feedback from agencies. When you work with agencies and they get used to working with food clients, and I got to tell you, unless you're having this conversation I'm about to share with them, you're not getting the best work because they'll, I'll say I want disruptive and I want it to feel big and punch above its weight and blah, blah, blah. And then they'd come back with something that's like, oh, that's fine. It looks like everybody else. And I will say, I really want you guys to push and make us uncomfortable. And I'm serious about it. And this has happened many times, but most recently on my current brand, Back to Nature, they've come back and like, that is the most inspiring thing. Thank you so much. And that was the unlock for us to get what we needed, which is, it's not in market yet, but it's going to be very cool. But you almost need to give them the safety to think big, because they don't think that we want big, and they've been through it many, many times where big never wins. And so they give you what they think you want. And so I was telling the head of the agency this, and I was like, your team is amazing. And he said, there's a saying in the agency world that clients get the work that they deserve. And then he was like, and you get good work, but it's true.
We don't
So
talk about
don't
that,
be
huh?
that client. Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, thank you for giving me time to think. Trust in allowing that room for trust and like free speaking within a group is the thing. So it's not so much what you say, like a line. It's about the idea that I'm not going to shoot down everything. I'm not going to, and it's not just like there's no bad ideas here, because there's bad ideas. There are bad ideas. It's more about the idea that you're free to say something within there and be open and all that kind of stuff, because otherwise you will not get that. I always know that an innovation team is a good innovation team if I hear some laughing and all that kind of stuff. People are comfortable, right? People are comfortable and they know that they're comfortable. I've said this to clients before, which is kind of weird, but I'm like, I have a dog, and a dog is happy when they roll over on their belly, right? And so when I see teams like this, they're like, they're kind of like that. They're exposing themselves. They say stuff that you could kind of like turn against them. You know what I mean? Like, well, that was a dumb idea. Like, who thinks like that? The best leaders are the ones that allow people to be like that. Even if they don't come up with great stuff, they inspire others in the team. So that's what I would say. It's not a line, it's a feeling.
A career limiting statement.
Career limiting statements, yeah.
Which shouldn't exist in that environment. It's a safe space. Yeah, that's great.
You should tell everybody what you wrote many years ago about the difference between the entrepreneur and the big company and innovation, and marry them single.
Oh,
I don't even remember writing that. I usually don't even remember what I said after I wrote it. I don't know if I agree with myself after I wrote it.
Large corporation and married and have kids and have a mortgage and college education, and you just pay. Just don't take any risk.
Yes. That is true. Yes. I always think about that. It's like when the idea of taking risk, it's like in a big company, it's like, well, this doesn't work out, I might get moved to a different division. But if you're an entrepreneur, it's like, I might not be able to eat. I mean, there's a different push. Different push behind. Yeah.
There's definitely a drive that
There's
you
a different
don't
drive.
get
And
inside
again,
a corporation. That's for sure. And in case none of you know that Irish voice, that was Kieran, our most famous Irishman here in town in Minneapolis, just so we know who asked that question. And also past guest on this little show of ours. Okay, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you both for doing this. And thank you all for coming and for your questions. We have an amazing lineup all the way through the rest of the year, except we haven't figured out June yet. June, I'm not entirely sure. We might just cancel June. I haven't done that yet. I'm not going to. So that Kiona's got it figured out. She's got it figured out.
You mean like this June?
No, yeah, this coming June. I know. That's why. For some reason, June is a tough month for us to get speakers. 3 years in a row.
Everyone's at their cabin.
I know they leave on me. They're like, I'm not doing that thing. No, Keona's got it figured out. She's going to get us our paired up guest for June. It's going to happen. Anyway. Yes, home decor design related. Anyway, we've got someone to pair them up with. We just don't have that other person. Anyway, if you want to know more about Capsule, talk to Keona. If you want to, suggest a speaker, Rachel is your person to go to. And again, thank you so very much for doing this. I am so glad we were able to make this happen, the two of you. Thank you, everyone.